Welcome to episode number 11 of the And One Analytics podcast. I'm your host, Alex West, and today we have special guest Matte Christison on the show to discuss Game 5 of the NBA Finals, as well as the overarching consequences that this 4-1 dismantling will have on the league in the next few years. So we're excited to have Matte. Brent, take us away.
Golden State can dribble it out. There it is, redemption for Golden State. One of the great playoff runs of all time is complete. The Warriors are NBA champions again.
So for the second time in 3 years, the Golden State Warriors are NBA Finals champions. And to talk about that, I brought in Matte Christison. Matte, how are you today, living in the post-Kevin Durant as an NBA champion world?
Well, I knew this day was coming, but that doesn't mean I'm ready for it.
Well, you better get ready because it might come a couple more times in the next few years.
I think you're correct.
So let's...
wow.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive. Shall we talk about last night to start with and then sort of work our way back and talk about the series and what it means going forward?
Yeah, that works for me.
All right. So what were your impressions of last night? What happened last night that really stood out to you?
Well, let's see. Okay, so the things that probably stood out to me the most last night was Tristan Thompson actually having an offense.
Okay. All right.
Not that that's like the defining trait of last night's game, but just sticks out to me like, where was that the whole series until this point?
Tristan Thompson scored 15 last night, which was more than he had scored in all the games prior to that put together.
Yeah, I mean, I was just so shocked just to see him put it on the floor and drive to the basket. I was, who is this guy, and where has he been all series?
Particularly when Zaza was guarding him, I think it was maybe the second possession of the game where he just puts it on the deck and takes 2 dribbles and lays it in. And it was like, oh, yeah, you can just take Zaza off the dribble all the time. So I thought that was an interesting wrinkle. He played so poorly. I think that's part of why it sticks out in your head was just how poorly he played in every game prior to this one. And last night, 15-8, pretty good, but, boy, he's been just awful.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to mention – he got out-rebounded by Curry, and significantly at that throughout the whole series. It's if I'm the Cavs right now, I feel like everyone other than LeBron and Kyrie is expendable in terms of like what I can do in the offseason.
Oh yeah, you're looking for anything you can get. We'll get more into Kyrie in a second, but I definitely think that there is some room for improvement. My big takeaway, similar to yours, about something that probably no one cares about is I felt like Andre Iguodala was actually healthy last night, and I felt like that made a huge difference, that having a guy who can guard LeBron, who can team up with Klay while Klay's guarding Kyrie, that makes a huge difference on their on-ball defense. And you can never really stop LeBron, but slowing him down, wearing him out, that's a strategy that Golden State has put to some good use, and I feel like a healthy Andre Iguodala is a very big factor in all of that.
Yeah.
So that was So those are our takeaways about players nobody cares about.
I know. Maybe this is not the best note to start the podcast off on, but
we're gonna go over Tristan Thompson and Andre Iguodala. Everybody listens. Subscribe to the podcast. That's what we talk about.
But yeah, I mean, we can shift gears here. I mean, Kevin Durant did have an amazing night.
He did.
An amazing series overall. I mean, he did not have a bad game in the whole series.
He did not. He played very, very well. Averaged 35 for the series. His stats are 35 points, 8.4 rebounds, 5.4 assists, with 1 steal, 1 block, or 1.5 blocks. That's a pretty impressive stat line no matter how you cut it.
Yeah, for sure.
I
see he also had a plus 18 last night.
He did have a plus 18 and was plus 6 for the entire series, which is pretty impressive. Did he do anything for you? I mean, did he elevate himself you thought he was the second best player in the league. I thought he was the second best player in the league. Does this finals performance do anything to bring the disparity between 1 and 2 a little closer for you?
It does.
Okay.
I mean, I thought that the gap between him and LeBron was wider than it was, and I mean, in certain ways, he's a better scorer than LeBron. I think that's pretty non-debatable after this finals, and more consistent. But LeBron rounds his game out in so many other ways, better than Curry does, passing, rebounding.
Yeah, I kind of am with you that I thought that the gap was pretty wide, particularly going into this series, how well LeBron had played. But coming out of this series, you start to think how well, and the scoring averages don't really tell the story. LeBron averaged 33, Durant averaged 35, but Durant had such an ease with which he was scoring. He could just pull up on a dime, elevate, shoot a jumper, and he was scoring, part of which can be attributed to an offensive system, but another part of it is just that he is so long and lanky and can shoot over so many guys that he doesn't have to rely on getting to the basket as much as LeBron does, and I think that's a big factor. I will say, I'm not going to say that this is going to happen, but I will say that there is certainly a chance within the next 2 or 3 seasons that Durant usurps the mantle as best player in the league as LeBron starts to age. I could definitely see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, with LeBron, you can't really stop him, but he does have to exert. He has to use his physicality. He has to, burn up his reserves, backing down in the post, or breaking through like 3 defenders to get to the rim. Whereas Kevin Durant can just elevate, no one can contest his shot, and he makes it look easy.
Yeah, and I think,
and then he has all that much more energy for defense on the other end of the floor.
Yeah, and he's tough to guard. He plays defense well, and he, unfortunately for all of us, the comparison's not very fair to compare Durant to LeBron because Durant doesn't have to use as much. He doesn't have to give as much in any one game. He can pick his spots and be efficient, and it sort of shows in the box score where he was shooting 47% from 3. LeBron shot 38% from 3. Those kinds of efficiency stats are just so skewed in Kevin Durant's favor, and I think it's just because of the team he's on.
Yeah, well, and another thing about LeBron working harder for his points is that you look at his free throw percentage for the series, right at 65%. That is not a great number. I mean, they call it the charity stripe for a reason. You need to convert when you're there at a higher rate than 65%. And he's a good shooter. There's no reason for his free throw percentage to be that low.
Yeah, his career free throw shooting percentage is 70, right at 75. So a big dip. He's had a few seasons, particularly a few playoffs where it's been that way, and I think it sort of coincides to how much he's having to give in other places, and maybe a little bit of a mental block, but the seasons where he gives a lot tends to be the seasons where he does not shoot as well from the free throw line.
Yeah, that said, but, as my dad said growing up, that's the only shot you can practice. So,
Papa Steve dropping his wisdom.
He's right. It is the only shot you can practice.
Yeah.
There's never a defender in your face that, you can hit that shot at more than a 65% clip.
Especially if you're the best player in the world. So
exactly.
There's another thing that you and I were talking about this last night. Just want to touch on it briefly because I know it doesn't make tremendous radio, but there were some weird lineups in the game, right? Like, I'm not crazy to say that both Kerr and Lou used some very weird lineups. Maybe it's because of foul trouble early in the game, and that's where you had sort of commented on it, that Cleveland was sitting LeBron and sitting Kyrie early in the game, and I sort of caught on to Steve Kerr does this thing where he puts 3 non-shooters on the court all at the same time. But there were some weird lineups, right?
Yeah, there were. I don't like Ty Lue's call of getting that early rest for LeBron and Kyrie. Like, if you have that advantage, you got to push it when you have it. I thought it was a mistake to not try to run up the score while they had so much foul trouble in the first. That was pretty baffling to me. I mean, I get the thought process behind it, but that doesn't mean that it's really justifiable in any sense.
It also affected his rest schedule, I thought, further into the game. Like, I think it threw off. He usually does rest LeBron there at the end of the first quarter, but he usually doesn't rest Kyrie at the same time. And I think that made it kind of off kilter for the rest of the game. And then Kerr's lineup of, let's see, it was Livingston, West, McCall, Durant, and Steph Curry. And they kept collapsing on Steph Curry because they had 3 guys on the court who can't shoot threes.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be said, and I've sort of gone into my Steve Kerr's not that great a coach rant on a previous podcast, but I don't think either of these guys are tremendous coaches. I think it's sad that Pop and Brad Stevens had to die in the conference finals for that.
Agreed. I don't think you can sit LeBron and Kyrie at the same time.
I don't.
That's just not going to – I mean, who else is going to create offense on your team, you know?
Well, you got Darren Williams.
I mean, I guess your real answer to that question is J.R. Smith, but just – he doesn't do very well off the dribble.
And he doesn't create offense for other guys at all.
No. I mean, I like him as a spot-up shooter, but, yeah, you got to have one of them on the floor at all times.
All right, so that's last night's game. We both, I think, feel like Durant's Finals MVP, well-earned.
Yeah.
Does winning a game do anything for you? Does it the Cavaliers winning Game 4, does that do anything for you? Moving the needle?
Well, yeah, I'll say that, and I mean, Game 3, as close as that was, I mean, you know, granted a loss is still a loss, but between that they almost won Game 3, and then they did win Game 4, you know, that makes it a more competitive series than perhaps the 4-1 line indicates. I see a lot of people saying, you know, talking about being disappointed in this series. I don't necessarily know that I share that opinion. I enjoyed watching the series, honestly. Like, I wish it would have gone to 7 games. I wish it would have been more competitive, or at least 6 games, you know. But I'm not super disappointed with it.
Well, maybe that's the conspiracy theory about the conspiracy theory, because everybody thought the NBA was going to make the series go to 7 with foul calls, and that was a conspiracy theory. So now they're trying to throw us off the scent by not letting it go to 7.
Yeah.
Thoughts on the double conspiracy theory?
Well, all right. So I read a lot of comments online, particularly in regards to Game 4 with its terrible, terrible officiating.
Oh, God. That was some of the worst officiating. Well, I was going to say I ever remember, but I do remember the 0-2 Lakers King series. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and if that's what we're drawing comparisons to, then that's a pretty sad indictment.
But then comparatively, it was positively the best ref game in the history of the league, comparatively.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it was bad, and a lot of people online saying, oh, this is proof that the NBA is, trying to draw out the series, make it last longer, which, I mean, I don't put any stock in. In that game, Golden State got to the line more than the Cavs did. So I think that, if nothing else, deflates the theory. Yeah, the fouls on the Warriors came earlier in the game, and that the earlier the foul, the bigger the impact it has. But there were just some really questionable calls that went certainly both ways. But I mean, also against Cleveland with Kevin Love drawing that flagrant foul was pretty clearly an on-ball play.
Yeah.
That just happened to hit Durant in the face. So I had a list somewhere, but I mean, there were a lot of bad calls going both ways that game. It was just poorly officiated all around.
Yeah.
Not
and then
conspiracy.
And then I think last night was the backlash from Game 4. I think that Derek Stafford, Ed Malloy, and the last guy's name just escaped me, Danny Crawford, were probably instructed to keep it a little tighter. And we saw that very early in the game with Clay picking up 2 fouls, with Draymond picking up 2 fouls. Or not Draymond, Durant, with Clay and Durant picking up 2 fouls. But I don't know. I mean, like, it is what it is. Fouls are always going to be a part of playoff games. Like, as much as I hated it, I am more pro letting the players decide, to the point where it gets a little overly physical to over-reffing. But that's just me. I do think that the Cavaliers winning Game 4 does something for me. It does move the needle. And I think you made such a great point about Games 3 and 5 being as close as they were. I kind of feel like, and this is going to be hot take because I think it's not a consensus opinion, I kind of feel like this is pretty close. in terms of talent disparity. I feel like the Cavaliers can make one move, maybe two moves, and be competitive with the Warriors. What do you think about that?
I agree with that in theory. The thing is, the Cavaliers, they got to get younger. There's too many veterans on that team. And yeah, I mean, they don't have the benefit of Golden State of like having drafted dudes where they get, that early career discount on them. They're going to have to trade for some younger talent, which will probably not work quite as well as they're hoping. But that's the biggest thing I see the Cavs needing to do is to get younger.
Yeah. We talked about Durant. We talked about LeBron. Let's talk about Kyrie Irving for a second. Kyrie Irving prove anything to you in these finals?
Yeah, Kyrie proved he was better than I thought he was going to be in this series. So a lot of his shots, I guess, he loves those like circus shots, twisting every which way at the rim, and I mean that's always cool to watch. Just because you get more entertainment out of stuff like that than Kevin Durant's fast break layup kind of thing. But yeah, Kyrie did more than I was expecting him to do.
Kyrie, to me, is one of the most creative. He's probably the most creative finisher at the rim I can remember in the league. I can't remember a guy who can attack the rim, use backboard spin, use all these kinds of things to create points the way he does. And he uses his body well for a guy who's small. He will use it to create space. I can't remember any guard as small as he is that had as developed a penetration game as Kyrie Irving does, which I think is impressive. But it leads me to my next question. Would you rather have Steph Curry or Kyrie Irving? If you were starting your team today, which player would you rather have, Steph Curry or Kyrie Irving? We didn't. For your listeners, we didn't do this in pre-show. I literally just sprung this on him. So get it, Matte.
I'm probably going to go with Steph Curry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's totally fair because that's who I was going to go with, and I hoped. Again, this is why you should go over these things in pre-show meeting. I hoped you had picked Kyrie so we could argue about it, but go ahead and elaborate on why you would pick.
All right. Sorry to disappoint that.
Yeah.
I can pretend I picked Kyrie.
No. Explain why you picked Steph.
Well, he's quite possibly the best shooter of all time. Kyrie, as fun as he is to watch, and he is a good scorer in his own right, but he's not the best shooter of all time.
True.
So
that's pretty good.
Steph Curry can just create so much offense because his range is the entire floor, or certainly the entire front court.
Yep. My thing about Steph is I think that he is a twofold great offensive player. I think Kyrie is a fantastic one-dimensional offensive player, probably the best in the league right now in terms of a one-dimensional scorer. He scores and scores and scores, but for me, he doesn't make the offense better as a whole. He's not creating for other guys. And then the other reason that I like Steph better is because of spacing. Having Steph Curry on the floor warps a defense. No matter where he is, you have to lock a guy on him. And you saw that a little bit in games 1 and 2 where the Cavs were kind of keyed on Curry and it let Durant do what he wanted. And I think that you're right. I mean, I think you do take Curry just because he brings more facets to the game. I also think Kyrie's a terrible defender and Curry's a passable defender, so that's another plus for him. But not a ton of difference for either one of those guys for me defensively.
Yeah. Well, speaking of defense, I mean, how great was Klay Thompson in this series?
Yeah, Klay was unbelievable. I mean, and I know that Kyrie he was the third leading scorer, 29.4 points a game, but Klay really clamped down, played some good defense, and I think that there are a lot of people thought that Klay wasn't going to get paid. He maybe wasn't going to get the max from someone, but I think there's a big decision coming down on whether the Warriors can keep enough cap room to give him the max because someone somewhere is giving Klay Thompson the max.
Yeah, they should. They certainly should.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, I would probably trade the number 1 pick in the draft this year for Klay Thompson if I was the Celtics. I mean, that's how much of an impact I think he has, even at 27, I'd probably trade Markelle Fultz or whoever the number 1 pick is to get Klay Thompson. I mean, I think he's just fantastic. He's a great two-way player. He's an incredibly underrated two-way player because you don't talk about him in the same breath as you talk about a guy like Kawhi, but I feel like his on-ball defense sort of puts him in that, maybe not as high, but in that same category with Kawhi.
Yeah, I wouldn't put him that high, but he's a great player, and he should get the max.
Yeah, well, I mean, just defensively, not.
Oh yeah. Defensively, yeah.
I'm not.
Certainly.
I mean, I would definitely, if you're asking me who I'd rather start my team with, give me Kawhi every time. But
right
on the defensive end, I think his impact is pretty great, and hopefully he'll get to see some returns on that in terms of like defensive player of the year voting and stuff like that. So let's talk about the big question. Do you feel like Cleveland's competitive enough? Do you blow it up? Do you think that they pursue that, or do you think that, like I said, that winning a couple of games or winning a game and keeping a couple of games close is enough to just run it back?
Well, they definitely need to make some changes there. I'm not sold on Tristan Thompson right now at all. He would be the first piece I'd be looking to move, but like I said, they got to get younger. There's just too many veterans on that team. They need to get people who can run the court. That's just the way that the league's going, and certainly the way that the Warriors are going. Assuming that our finals next year will be Cavs Warriors 4, which maybe we shouldn't assume, but
it feels pretty safe. I mean, we can't assume until July 1st. Till we know where the free agents land, or July 10th or whatever. The Cavs have 2 free agents that mean anything. Kyle Korver is a free agent, and Darren Williams is a free agent. So those are their only rotation players. They also are already this year they paid $128 million in the cap. They already have $125 committed for the coming season, which means any help they bring in, they're going to have to bring in via trade or draft, and they don't have any draft picks. So I don't know. One of my real problems with this series was, and I think I may have discussed this with you, I don't know, but if you can't play your best 4 guys together in a series, then you have to change something. And the Cavaliers certainly couldn't play LeBron, Kevin Love, Kyrie, and Tristan Thompson together against the Warriors. And so I think that there's probably a choice that has to be made whether you want to keep Tristan Thompson or Kevin Love. And unfortunately, I think you probably get a higher return on Love than you get on Tristan Thompson, but they need another wing player to be competitive.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I would do what I could do to move Tristan Thompson before I tried to move Love, but you're probably right that Love's stock is a little bit higher right now. I'm particularly just after Tristan's very poor showing in the finals here.
And Tristan Thompson has a lot of he does a lot of things very well, but he is like a shorter DeAndre Jordan to me. Like he's a rim protector, he's a good rebounder, he can finish on lobs, but that's about it. Like I don't know how much of a market there is for a guy who can't stretch the floor, who really is not a tremendous on-ball defender. He's a good help-side defender. He's a good defensive rebounder, but I don't see a lot of a market for Tristan Thompson.
Well, he's an okay rebounder.
He's an okay rebounder, you're totally right about that.
It was funny you should mention that because not more than a couple times through this series, I was kind of just imagining what if you had DeAndre Jordan instead of Tristan Thompson. That is a team I would love to see. I mean, I just love watching DeAndre play in general, but Tristan can go up and get the lob, but no one in the league, no one probably in history is better at that than DeAndre is. He can just, if it's anywhere in the same area code, he can grab it and throw it down. Yeah,
he's a pretty impressive dunker. I mean, I like Thompson's lob last night. The left-handed lob by LeBron was the most impressive part of that.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, it was certainly a very impressive lob that he finished last night. I mean, God, he got so high off the ground on that. It was insane. But that one aside, he can do it, but not as well as DeAndre, and he can't rebound. He can't rebound or defend as well as DeAndre. I don't think either.
Yeah,
so.
I just don't see a huge market to move Tristan Thompson. I mean, no matter how you cut it, so I feel like you're sort of left with, do we move Kevin Love is the question. I mean, and I think the bigger question for the Cleveland Cavaliers is what's going to happen with their front office. David Griffin is out of a job starting July 1st, so it will be interesting to see. There's been no movement on his contract as of today, and I know that the Magic and the Bucks are sort of gunning for his services, and so he's their biggest free agent so far, but then you get put in a situation where you have to decide what you want to do with this roster. And I know everybody's saying this is the trade that has floated across the internet is trade Love for Paul George, but I don't know that Indiana goes for something like that. If they think that there's any chance that Paul George makes the All-NBA team next season, then they have home court advantage in terms of being able to offer him an extra year and that $200 million extension. But I know that people are really on about this Kevin Love for Paul George trade.
Yeah. I'm not super familiar with that rumor. I don't really know how I feel about it, honestly, from either end. I
definitely think that if you pick up Paul George, then you're in a position to compete with the Warriors. I mean, I think that if a 1-for-1 were to happen, I'm not saying that it would, but I'm saying if you took Kevin Love off the Cavaliers and you put Paul George in his place, I think that's probably enough to make it competitive. Paul George is a guy who defends very, very well as an on-ball defender. He's one of the better two-way players in the league, and then you've got Kyrie and LeBron to go with him, and then Tristan Thompson in the middle. I think all of a sudden you have a competitive team, but I just don't see any incentive for Indiana to move on from Paul George when they can give him more money than anybody else. And they may lose him for nothing, which is something that is entirely a possibility, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That to me, it seems like there's going to be a much harder question than do we trade Kevin Love for Paul George this offseason. I don't think that that's going to be a question that comes across their desk. I think they're going to be plagued with who is the next Kyle Korver and how does he make us competitive. But, I don't know. I mean, I just don't see any easy fixes for this, and everybody wants to blow it up, and I don't see any way to blow it up unless it involves moving LeBron and Kyrie, at which point now you're not competitive anymore.
Right. Yeah, there's no easy fixes for them, that's for sure. Yeah, I don't know what I do if I'm Cleveland's front office.
I don't want that job, let me tell you that. Like that, if they call me tomorrow and say, "Hey, here's the job," then I'm taking the job and I'll figure it out. But it's not a job that I would be envious of, whether it's David Griffin or whoever takes the GM job. All right, last question, then we're gonna knock it off because we've almost got 30 minutes of podcast, which is where I feel like this series not tremendously interesting, not a lot to talk about, so keeping it short today, So my last question is this a dynasty? How many more championships do the Warriors need to make it a dynasty?
I feel like it is a dynasty. It's at this point maybe a little bit premature, but I don't know. I mean, their future's looking bright. Still, most of their stars are on the right side of 30. I can see. I don't want to be any other team in the league, honestly, for the next couple years, because these guys are really just hitting their prime.
At what point do you see, all things being equal, that say they re-sign all their guys? At what point do you see them tailing off? Do you think they have 5 seasons at a high level?
Ooh, it could be because aside from Iguodala, like none of their best players are over 30. Durant, Curry, Thompson, Green, they're all under 30. They should have 4 or 5 good more years in them, really.
Yeah, and
at the highest level. To
do another deep run on this one, I feel like Patrick McCaw was drafted with the sole purpose of replacing Andre Iguodala. When he was at UNLV, he was this 3-and-D dude, and if he can come in and replicate in the next couple of seasons 80 to 85% of what Iguodala did, then I think they're going to be in fine shape in terms of that hole. But anyway, that's my Patrick McCaw deep dive.
And I thought he had a pretty good series, honestly.
Yeah, he played pretty well. He's a 3-and-D guy. I mean, he didn't shoot tremendously well last night, but he certainly has shot well through the season, and everybody knows that that's where you want to be if you're a guy who just needs a little bit of space to hit a three-pointer. And if you want to catch and shoot, go play for the Warriors.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's good enough. We'll call it a day on that one. Matte, thanks for joining us. Thanks for always being a part of the podcast, particularly when I need you at short notice. You're my go-to guy. So anyway, thanks, Matte.
Glad to help.
Special thanks to Matte Christison for joining the show today. It's always nice to have his insight on the program. Make sure you're subscribed to us on Facebook, facebook.com/and1analytics, twitter.com/and1analytics, and make sure you're reading the blog. Even though it's summer, I'm still going to be pumping out weekly content on and1analytics.blogspot.com. Subscribe to us on SoundCloud, subscribe to us on YouTube, however you get your podcasts. Make sure you're getting the latest from And1 Analytics. This week we're going to do some more draft stuff on Thursday, probably do a finals review on Friday in terms of an article. So there's always new content coming out, even though basketball has ended. For the And1 Analytics podcast, I'm your host, Alex West. Have a great afternoon.